On this episode, I have a candid discussion with a risk-taking CMO who also happens to be my former boss. Welcome to Real Talk, the show where we talk about all things trending in the world of business, social media, and marketing. And we hear straight from the newsmakers themselves. Joining me here on the set of Real Talk at the Nasdaq market site in Times Square, New York City, is Mr. Nick Utton, former CMO at MasterCard and E-Trade. And he also happens to be my former boss. Nick, it is so good.
Carlos, it's nice to
see
be
you again.
with you. Thank you.
How have you been?
Things are great. I mean, since I stopped working at BMC, I'm having a ball. I'm on a board of a global messaging company, a mobile messaging company. I'm an advisor for a couple of companies. One of them is a great startup, which has got 14 billion people's money, Betterment, robo-investing, and I've got an array of consulting clients, and I'm having a blast.
Now, Nick, we are talking about risk-taking CMOs. And I've had an opportunity to work with you over the last 2 years. And I have to say, out of every CMO that I've worked for before, you, sir, understand not only where marketing has been, but where it's headed. So kudos and hats off to you.
Thank you, Carlos. When I hear risk-taking, I'd like to use the term calculated risk-taking as opposed to just a wild animal who's out there trying to hustle good marketing practices.
Now let's get into it. You have a very impressive resume. You spent years working at MasterCard. You were at E-Trade. You were at JP Morgan Chase. You spent time working at BMC, where we worked together. What defines you in terms of what makes for a stellar CMO?
Well, I always sort of start off at the end of the day is that what are the foundational elements of good marketing, and then we'll worry about a good CMO. Is you've got to acquire customers, say in the service world, you've got to keep them, and you've got to cross-sell them as cost-effectively as possible with segmentation, etc. You know, there's the strategy, there's the structure, there's the process, and there's the execution. And ultimately, it's about exciting and delighting customers, but at the same time, optimizing the revenue curve, because that's key. As a CMO, I've kind of looked at this process and said, let's follow best practices. Let's push the envelope as hard as we can and push the people that work for these companies to make sure that they're all committed, passionate about what they do. When you get some of those elements right, then you've got a good chance of being successful, or a better chance of being successful.
Now, I come from the new media side, from social media. I know from my time in working with you, things like impressions are what you refer to as fluffy metrics.
Coming from South Africa, whereby you had a limited number of media options. I mean, television only started in 1974. And people say, what do you mean 1974? What happened before that? We had radio. And you had to have any commercial in 9 to 12 languages, et cetera, et cetera. So fast forwarding to sort of the new world, metrics are key, but there's hard metrics and there's a hell of a lot of soft metrics which are full of BS. And one of the things I kind of pride myself on, is to say, be very involved in the media, planning and optimization and execution, and make sure that those metrics justify those decisions and fail fast, i.e. some of the tests we do not work. Some of the metrics shared by media partners are full of fluff. They're not substantive, and quite frankly, they look great on a sheet of paper, on a digital imprint, or on a digital file, but they do not work.
Do you think the fluff, though, is because you have marketers out there that are trying to justify their position within the organization?
Look, I think the fluff exists because some people are receptive to it. And quite frankly, sometimes fluff sells. So if you're a media partner, anything that will generate a buck for their side, providing there's a sort of a relatively long-term opportunity, will work. I look at this and say, hey, at the end of the day, show me the foundational metrics that you've got. I then try and break it up in terms of hard and soft, and then believing in the mantra, test, learn, optimize, work with the partners to say, if we're wrong with these metrics by half, we should have a 50% discount. Start there. So any test I want to implement with any media partner, rule one is give me the lowest possible price to start. Because if
it's classic Nick Utton.
Well, if it fails, at least I haven't lost my shirt. So it becomes a challenge. I think one of the dilemmas is a lot of CMOs are not well versed in hard metrics and soft metrics, and they basically assign these responsibilities to media agencies and say media planners and buyers in the company who, quite frankly, are distant from the true business metrics, and hence decisions are made that are suboptimal.
Now, what are your expectations? You mentioned partners, i.e. your vendors out there, your agencies. What are your expectations of them?
Well, there's true full partners and there's vendors. And, the true full partners are, advertising agencies, media planning, buying agencies. Those are true full partners. They then contract numerous tests with different publishers. So I look at those and say, yeah, there is a partnership, but I wouldn't call them full partners because they're in and out like yo-yos. When it works, it's fantastic, and when it doesn't work, I'm cutting. And at E-Trade, if you look at that sort of online investing universe, there are thousands of opportunities to take advantage of. The 80-20 rule prevails.
What is the 80-20 rule?
The 80-20 rule is 20% of the publishers account for 80% of the returns coming in and your new best accounts. So how do you make sure you focus all your money on those and do a few things well? Dilemma with a lot of CMOs and a lot of marketers, try to do too many things and end up with sort of average mediocrity.
Yeah, I can tell you from where I've worked in organizations before, more at the mid to senior level management, is I'm a practitioner, I'm a doer. I'm out there studying my craft in social media, but I think the frustration lies with practitioners like myself is the CMOs don't want to listen to us. They really are disconnected and far removed from what my specialization in the company is, and they don't want to give us budget.
At the end of the day, there's always budget. The world I come from, you can always find a budget from somewhere for a really good idea. The challenge is, obviously, from a lot of partners and a lot of vendors, how do you get in front of the CMO? And you've got this hierarchical system where all the gatekeepers are involved trying to stop you from getting that great idea to the ultimate decision maker. Now, along the way, there's some smart people all the way up the chain. I try to minimize that linkage between the top and the bottom to say, any great idea, please make sure it comes to my desk. But please don't send me a 40-page deck. I always come back in, and my criteria at all my companies was, give me a one-pager. What do you do, and why should I meet with you, and how can you help me? And if they can't articulate that in a one-page or a two-page or an email, I'm not meeting with them in a hurry.
I have to say, you are not the easiest CMO to present to, but you're also fair. Because I like your style of you'll hear out your employees, you'll provide them feedback, which is very honest, candid feedback, and you've got your line, what are the ahas, so what are the key discovery points, and you also have this infamous line, which is, how do we take this up 3 flights of stairs?
Carlos, you remind me of the good old days for a couple of years when we worked together. I think optimization is a key part of any marketer's objectives, KPIs. One of the things I've always kind of prided myself is that how do you push the envelope and get up 3 flights of stairs in terms of creative messaging, planning, optimization, and ultimately execution. And I don't know the answers at the beginning, but with smart people with metrics and a fact-driven approach, that helps. Now, I push hard because, not everybody approaches every single project, every dollar spent in that same way. But, that's worked for me, and I continue to follow that principle. And I do stub my toes along the way in terms of making some mistakes. But the test, learn, optimize mantra is the only solution towards optimization.
Which I love that mantra. Now let's talk about risk-taking Nick. So at E-Trade, you came up with the talking baby.
It was a risk-taking expedition, but I did have a gun at my head with a team of people whereby, some infamous analyst at Citibank came up with a line, there is a chance that E-Trade could go bankrupt. Fast forward, there was a run on the bank. and over $15 billion of cash and money and investments moved out of the system, but fast. And we took a step back and said, if this continues, we will not be around. So I went to the then CEO, and I said, I need a brand damage fund. And he said, what does that mean? I said, look, I made up the term, but we need money to reassure customers who are leaving in droves with money moving out. And if we don't try and protect this brand, firstly, E-Trade won't exist, the board won't exist, and none of us will have jobs. Fast forward, we hired Gray, and there's a guy called Tor Myron who was Chief Creative Officer, he's now at Apple, who came up with a conceptualized idea of the baby for a Super Bowl commercial. And that Super Bowl was 5 weeks away. And when I saw it, I said, I think that's one of the most brilliant concepts I've ever seen. Let's pre-test it quickly, and let's go for it. Cut a long story short, he had a second idea, and that was the baby puking on national television saying, so easy a baby can do it, but hysterically funny and different. And he came up with a second concept whereby we had a second commercial. And basically, I ended up negotiating with CBS to give us a discounted rate for the second commercial at a lower price. So I bought 2 commercials. And there's this perverse logic that any company buying 2 spots in the Super Bowl, reaching 110 million people, there's no ways they're going bankrupt. And it was a calculated risk, but every time we showed it to small audiences, everybody responded favorably. But the day of the Super Bowl, I was a nervous puppy with a group of people at E-Trade and also
So you were having chicken wings and Bud Light then?
I was nervous, but quite frankly, as it ran, you then just looked to the social media chatter and just said, you know what, we've hit the ball out the park. And long story short, between those 2 ads and a massive effort by the head of the brokerage group on the phone with customers, on email with customers, on the website, reassuring customers that E-Trade was a really strong foundational company with good, with a good foundation, and helped our credibility. We stopped the run on the bank, thank God, and we kept going with that campaign for 6 more years.
Yeah, it's a very famous campaign. I've seen it many times, and once again, a testament to you as a risk taker. Now, you mentioned social media. I heard that in there.
Yeah.
You've worked in marketing for some time, so you've seen this evolution from traditional to digital and social. Would you say that you are a proponent of social media?
I'm absolutely a proponent, but the trick is, what's the perfect mix? But let me just take a step back. When I got to E-Trade, in 2007, 2006-ish, the online spend was less than 10%. Now you say, who's the target audience? Very quickly, digitally inclined folk, et cetera. How can 10% be right? So I went to the board and I said, I think the true number should be towards 30 to 40% online. And they said, well, why don't you do it in one step? And I said, because if I'm wrong, E-Trade loses and I lose my job. So what we did is we did a number of tests. Yahoo from zero, we eventually spent about $18 million a year with them, etc. So firstly, the evolution was prove that online works. Secondly is we did numerous tests in the social media space and quite frankly struggled to nail a perfect mix of social with the online mix. We struggled because when we did numerous tests with Facebook in the early days, we certainly got customers coming in, but they were about a quarter of the value of the average customer coming in via digital and, say, analog. So net, I'm a proponent of social, but I believe it has the law of diminishing returns hits. This doesn't become 100% social and zero everything else. It's a mix of what's the mix between digital, including social, and then analog. And there's still a space for analog.
And you see, this is where I have to go ahead and push back on you, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So social media, you can do targeting. You can truly measure the ROI because you can see real numbers of who is consuming and seeing your content, who's moving forward, who's advancing from Facebook, say, over to your website, who converts if we're now talking about B2B. Print, TV, radio, do you have access to those same metrics?
You don't. You have different metrics. But let me just take a step back and say the way I look at it is, a 30-second commercial is 30 seconds long and a mile wide. Someone once said. It's got multidimensional elements. A social message is worth some other value, but it's certainly not the same value as a 30-second. So I look at this across the spectrum and said there's a space for it, but in the post-click, post-view arena, whereby if I click on a search ad via Google, definitively, and they go to the website, I know definitively who came. This whole attribution model and modeling, I look at that, there's a lot of fluff there in terms of every company coming along and saying that's the attribution. Saying, hold on. There were 43 ads on that page of, say, AOL. How do you know that caused the impression and the visit later? Social the same way. So I look at this and say there's degrees of finite measurement. Digital search, paid search, definitive. Attribution, question mark. Social, even there's a question mark, because I know they came in, but ultimately, when I look at the pool of customers, and this is a live test which we did, the Facebook customer gave us between a third and a quarter of the opening account value as the average analog digital customer. So I look at this and say, this is a math exercise. So I love social, I believe in social, but it's not just shotgun social. This is very targeted social to say, okay, in the B2B space, if you don't have, say, LinkedIn in your mix, you're missing something. Now, I work with a safari company, Wilderness Safaris, which is one of the preeminent luxury safaris providers. Instagram and those videos and those magnificent photographs, sharing experiences, you can't beat that experience communication that they've got, say, versus a Twitter feed. It's different. So I look at each one of these differently, but at the same time as that, I confess, I'm a digital immigrant, and I've got to stay on top of all these social trends and the metrics, and then say, okay, prove it to me that this will work in our environment, whether it's a robo-investing company or a safari company or a data analytics company. Each one of them, depending on the creative and the mix of social messaging, will vary.
So what I hear there is that you need to have an omni-channel presence.
Absolutely.
You need to be across the board, provided that your customers are there. And I'd actually say that's a good piece of advice, not just to the community and social media managers at brands, but also to the CMOs themselves.
Look, omni-channel is key, but I always come back to, within omni-channel, micro-targeting. I mean, I'm working with the world's largest, fastest growing electronic bond trading company called Market Access. They have an 80% share in the United States in transactions, but in volume, only 20%. There are only 10,000 people who make up the decision-making of, who's going to make those decisions to move to electronic versus over the phone. Only 10,000. There are only 1,300 companies. So you've got to micro-target, incredibly careful, because the famous line of half of all advertising is wasted. The trick is to work out which half. Yeah, you could have 95% of your money wasted. So it's a balancing act between all of this. But micro-targeting is not a new trend. It's a critically important trend to make sure that we minimize the waste.
Now, you have your test, learn, optimize mantra. Another one of your mantra is hitting home runs and grand slams.
Absolutely.
Speak to that.
So the way I look at it is that do fewer things better and try and hit a home run. And, in South Africa, we don't have baseball as a sport. We have cricket. But, a home run here is quite a big deal. And, a first inning, getting to 1, 2, and 3 is suboptimal because you want to get a home. So I look at this and say, how do you hit those home runs? And home runs are hard, but pushing harder, pushing the creative, pushing the messaging mix, pushing the media planning, pushing the execution, and then failing fast, because if stuff doesn't work. So home runs are the ideal for any organization I work with.
Nick, on a closing note, where do you see marketing headed?
Marketing is, people ask me sort of marketing art and science. My model is marketing is becoming more and more science, and my average model with all the companies, B2B and B2C, is it's 70% science. But without the art, you've had it, because if it's all rational, you need the emotional piece. So I look at this and say, science project, perfection doesn't exist, keep pushing, keep optimizing, And that's what marketers have to do. It's about making long-term returns for organizations.
What would your best piece of advice be for your peers out there who are also in the C-suite?
You know, look, there's many different ways. Use fact-driven decision-making with good calculated risks, analytics, segmentation, all the classic stuff, but speed is a competitive weapon. And one of the things I've watched along the way is folk want to pontificate, bureaucratize, and that's suboptimal. So those are a couple of guiding principles, but there's not one Nickism that says you follow that, you'll be successful.
Nick-isms are where it's at. Nick, where can the viewers out there connect with you and learn more about you and consume some of your Nick-isms?
I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, a couple of the social. The good news is anyone's digitally inclined can get hold of me somehow.
At Happy Nick.
At Happy Nick, that's what about my Twitter handle.
Nick Utton, thank you so much. It is great to have you here on the set of Real Talk with Nasdaq. On our next segment, I'm going to interview Bonin Bao, who is another risk taker. Stay tuned.